So I wanted to sing that song this evening because that line, prepare me to be a sanctuary, is actually in this week's Torah portion, which is why I also sing the Hebrew verse. I don't know if y'all do that. Yeah? Cool. No? Yeah? Maybe? We have a church group here. I'll introduce them. Or not church group. Fine. I'll just tell you now. Union University from Jackson, Tennessee, yes? Yes. Is their world religions class is joining us tonight, and I saw some of them singing along, so it made me happy. So I want to tell you a story about a different sanctuary. There was a congregation, and hopefully this doesn't bring up memories from the past year. There's a congregation that raised money to finally build a new sanctuary, to build a new building. You can't relate to that, can you? Here, yeah. Oh, wait. Fundraising. So there's a congregation that raised all this money to build a new sanctuary. And they had endless meetings with committees and interviews with architects and contractors. It was a nightmare. But in the end, the synagogue was finally ready to open. This was after months and even years. But finally, their building was complete. A date was set, and there was going to be a great big community gathering. There were dignitaries and officials from all over who were going to join for the event, which I'm sure happened when this building opened in the 70s. Dignitaries, and, why not? So the people gathered as the sun was setting, and they had the architect lead the tour of the building. But as night was coming, people started looking around for the light switches. They couldn't find any. They figured that after all this money and time that they put into building this sanctuary, that someone must have thought to put lights in. But it continued to get darker and darker. And finally, a young girl shouted out, "I can't see anything." Others chimed in, grumbling. They were complaining all the way. And finally, the architect announced, "There aren't any light switches. In fact, there are no lights." You can imagine the pandemonium that ensued. The board members shouting, "How could you do this?" Which I also wonder about that part of the story of the board members had to know, right? But the rabbi of this congregation spoke up, and she said, "We actually designed this building without lights. And that's because we wanted to show you that in order to truly have light, you need to bring light from home. You need to bring a lantern with you. And if only a few of you are here, our sanctuary will be dark. We won't be able to see in every corner. But the more who gather, the more who bring their lanterns, the more light we will have in this place." And that's how it is here as well. When you come, you bring your light, so I want to thank all of you for bringing your lanterns with you this evening. You are what creates the holiness we feel when we are together inside the space and even when we're together in community outside of it. It's how we build our sanctuary, by showing up. Each of us brings a different light, but also each of us is needed. It's noticeable when you don't show up. In this week's Torah portion, we read of the building of a different sanctuary, that of the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary that accompanied the Israelites in the desert. God instructs Moses, "Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts from every person whose heart moves them." So the people who were donating to the building of this not only had to just begrudgingly cough up whatever it was, dolphin skins, gold, silver, copper. I always think dolphin skins is the funniest, but they're in the desert, where did those come from? But that's for a higher pay grade than me to answer. But each person brought something different, and they brought it from their heart, and because they brought it from their whole selves, they were part of building this special dwelling place for God. And I found, when I was studying the Torah portion this week, I found a midrash, a rabbinic story that tells of Moses' attempt to explain how the menorah was built. So there's all these instructions in this Torah portion. It talks about building the Holy of Holies. It talks about building the menorah, the 7-branch candelabra, the altar, all these different pieces. But when it gets to the menorah, which I also thought, I once in rabbinical school literally had to try to draw the menorah based on the instructions in the Torah. It wasn't pretty. So I can't even imagine back then. But so the story says that Moses went up and down Mount Sinai again and again, goes up to God, says, God, how do we build the menorah again so I can go tell the artist down there? God explains, Moses goes, he gets to the artist and says, I remember there was something with gold and like branches, but I don't really remember all the details. And Rabbi Brad Artson poses the question, why on earth would Moses find these details to be so difficult to retain? After all, according to certain traditions, the way Torah was passed on was that Moses memorized the entire thing. So this is a person who's been proven to have some strong memory. I wish I only remember like the random facts that you never need to know. So I wish I had Moses' brain for Torah. But, so Artson asks, how could a skilled and gifted mind have trouble remembering the details of the menorah? He offers an answer, Rabbi Artson. He says, perhaps the Torah is telling us that even the most gifted among us has both strengths and weaknesses. Each of us has a special ability or gift that is our unique strength. He takes us to be the symbolism behind the menorah for the tent of meeting. Because what happens at the end of this story is God finally tells Moses, don't worry about it. The artists will get it. So he's able to go to the artist, Bezalel, and explain how to build the menorah, and Bezalel gets it. But the 7-branch candelabra, it has obviously multiple lights. And Rabbi Artson says that this is to show that each one of us has our own uniqueness. And the way he proves that is to say that with a 7-branch menorah, we're not talking about a Hanukkah for Hanukkah, the 7-branch menorah, all of the lights, all of the candles, or oil lamp or whatever, are supposed to be at the exact same level, like not even a smidgen off. They're supposed to be completely even, and if they're not, that is the only thing that can make a menorah treif, ritually impure. So if they're not on the same levels, can't use it. And Rabbi Artson says that this is to show that each light shows the same uniqueness. None is above another. They might look a little bit different, but we all bring these things within us. So a few verses after God has just requested the people bring gifts, again, only if they wanted to, which, I wish my mom would have told me that, like, only if you want to, you can get me, that would mean more. So after God requests that the people bring gifts, we find the much-studied and debated verse, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, from Exodus chapter 25, verse 8. Make for me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. And it's that last word, them, b'tocham, that sends Torah commentators from all generations into a frenzy. They ask, shouldn't it read instead that I may dwell within it? If God's saying, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell within them, that's what the Torah says, that's what the Hebrew means. Shouldn't it say it instead of them? And a 19th century commentator, the Malbim, said, you're reading it all wrong. It actually is saying, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell within them. And he's saying that really the Mishkan, really where God resides, is inside us, is within our hearts. But we have to make sure, just as building the Mishkan took effort and time and materials, so too does having a space for God in our heart. Rabbi Kariolitsky reminds us that if our hearts are filled with anger and bitterness and negative thoughts, we don't always have room for God. Sometimes we become completely consumed that there's no room left. And it doesn't mean that you can't be angry. It doesn't mean that you can't be bitter. You're going to feel those things. I'm sorry, I don't have a magic wand to get rid of those uncomfortable, negative feelings. But it means that we can have those feelings, but also make sure that we leave room for God. Leave room for our uniqueness to shine through. And through this, the light we bring to light up any space comes from that place in our hearts where God resides. And leaving room for God in your heart is what enables you to search out the unique gifts in yourself and with others. This is what it means to build God a sanctuary within us. I would also argue that God didn't need the Mishkan, right? Like, they'd already made it this far in the desert. God was with them. They knew God was with them. But it was the Israelites that actually needed that physical space to imagine God dwelling within. And we can kind of understand that. Sometimes you need to see something to believe it. But now to build a sanctuary within our hearts takes a little bit more work. My prayer for us this evening is that we are able to use the light within us to search for those pieces within ourselves that are uniquely us, and that we use that knowledge to continue to bring our light to our community together. We here are building a sanctuary not only for God, but a sanctuary for the Jewish people and for really the community of Memphis. So, Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will, and Shabbat Shalom.